Welcome back to the Wilson Combat YouTube channel. My old buddy Bill Wilson and myself giving you another approach or another look at the gun guys. While you're at it, don't forget to push that subscribe button and get in line for future information that's coming your way on the gun guys and a number of other issues involving Wilson Combat. Now, Bill's here today. You know, Bill and I are both guys that are pretty serious about good triggers on our shooting irons.
Yes.
And I'm convinced that, like you know, an AR, everybody's worried about how well it'll group, what it's capable of printing, and that's important. But you and I both know, with a lousy trigger, I don't care how good the gun can shoot, you won't shoot it very well. Yeah, so you've got an interesting product. Tell me about what's going on, Bill.
Well, Ken, what we got here, we've got our TTUs, and we make them in several different configurations. We do the two-stage standard M2, which is kind of my favorite one, you know. And then we do basically the same trigger unit where we put heavier springs in it and a little bit more engagement, and it's we call it the Paul Howe version or the military LE version, which has got a heavier initial take-up and second stage on it. And then we do the single stage, and then we also do a 3-gun, which has kind of like a rollout trigger pull to it. It's great for shooting fast, not so great for shooting groups. Then we make one specific for the 9mm carbines.
Now the 9mm carbine, is it required because of the impact of the blowback bolt, different components as far as springs and stuff, or is it?
Yeah, it had to be designed specifically for the 9mm carbines.
Yeah. Now I noticed looking at it that you're using quality materials for the hammer and sear and disconnector. What's your approach on that?
Well, unlike a lot of them on the market that are made either, the housing will be, from a stamping or something like that, and the hammer and sear disconnector, critical parts will be either from a casting or from a MIM process, something like that. We manufacture the whole thing with the exception of, like the springs and, the small pin top stuff. We make it all out of bar stock. The housing itself is machined out of solid stock, and then the hammer and sear and disconnector are all three machined out of precision tool steel, and they're through hardened. So how a factory trigger is. If you try to polish around it, you polish the case hardening, and then it's soft on the inside. Our parts are through hardened all the way through. They're not just case hardened.
Yeah. When I was taking the tour of the machine shop today and talking to Brent, he was giving me some insight into some of the new processes and new equipment. By the way, pretty impressive. You got a lot going on now. But what struck me was that how you guys have stepped up to plate to supply components that, quite honestly, often are in short supply. Instead of relying upon, the vendor system, you guys have invested a lot of money to produce components. Here's a little segment of some of the things we saw today. Hey gang, I've got one of the Wilson Combat TTU trigger units. It utilizes a EDM hammer and trigger. Interesting process. Brent, what is happening here? And explain a little bit to me, if you will, just briefly, how does that EDM process actually work?
Okay, so the EDM uses a copper wire and electricity to cut a metal part out of any material, whether it's hard, soft, as long as it can absorb the electricity current and the wire doesn't physically touch the part, it actually just discharges between the wire and the part, and it disintegrates the material right in front of the wire, and then it goes out in a water out through the machine, it gets filtered out, and then it cuts very precision parts down to micron. So a human hair, for instance, is about 127 micron, and this thing will be within a few microns. So the accuracies and the tolerances on this thing is what makes the EDM such a successful machine in the trigger for the TTU components and the hammer struts, all the stuff that we make on these. We stick by the bulletproof mentality here at Wilson. We use the billet parts. So we want to cut them out of a solid plate or a solid stock. And so the wire is one of the best machines at that because it gives you the accuracy that you want out of the material at the hardness you want so that you can make the part with the engagement surfaces real nice and tough and accurate right off the get-go. So because we're able to hold so much tighter tolerance than most people, especially the MIM and the cast parts, stamp parts, we're able to reduce our engagement surfaces safely down to just thousandths of an inch, so that we can control that 3-pound or that 4-pound trigger depending on what model you get, so that we don't have the 12-pound mil-spec trigger, stuff like that that really pulls the gun.
Yeah.
So we're able to control the smoothness and the engagement surface to get that crisp trigger.
You know, I've got an interesting piece of steel here. I'm going to guess you can tell me what I'm looking at, Brent.
All right, so when we get our material ready for the EDM, we get our ground stock in nice and flat, and then we have to drill some holes in it, get it prepped up for the EDM so that we can feed the wire into a hole and cut our puzzle pieces out. And what we'll do is we'll take these with the drilled holes, we'll stack them up 10, 15, 20 deep, depending on how many we can get in there. So as you're cutting one puzzle piece out, you're actually getting 10 parts out. That's what makes these machines so efficient and so great.
That's cool.
Yep.
And the end result is?
So these ones would be your disconnectors that'll go in the TTU. They got to go through a milling process, but they'll be ready to rock and roll here shortly.
That's pretty neat.
And then once we get through, we'll go to the mill, finish out the pockets and stuff that these machines can't do. But once it's done, it's one of the better ones on the market for sure, because of the care and the time we take to make sure it's not a stamped part or a cast part or any of the MIM parts that you know and Bill know through testing, they just don't hold up as well.
Yeah, we understand a lot of people are attracted to those components because of cost.
Yeah.
But from a wear and durability and particularly precision, they often don't measure up.
That's correct.
So obviously, I know from my experience, this is a pretty impressive unit.
Yeah.
And the quality of the trigger pulls is spot on.
Thousands, if not millions of trigger pulls,
Yeah.
and you're good to go.
Hey, thank you for the explanation,
No
Brett.
problem, Tim.
One of the things I've found with using these is that when you do have to clean a gun, the fact it's an enclosed unit, you can take it out and clean it. I mean, I tell people, flushing out a little bit of solvent, gun scrubber, air, and really that's about all it takes.
Oh yeah, you hit it with gun scrubber, dry with air compressor, dry, compressed air, and then squirt a little bit of, whatever lube you like in there, just for corrosion.
Preferably Wilson Ultima Lube type product.
Just basically re-lube it and drop it back in, and you're good to go.
Yeah, that's I've been.
I'll usually decaulk it, before I do that. I'll usually.
So you get the sear notch cleaned up pretty good. Yeah.
Have it like that so you can really get down in there when I blast it out and clean it, and then you put it back in the gun and you're good to go. And it's so easy to change out or initially install it. All there is to it. You have the gun in the fire position. Obviously, you make sure it's unloaded, and you just slide the unit in there like so.
Replace the pins.
Tap your two pins in. From left to right, there's rings on the pins there that that holds them in place.
Yeah.
They need to be on the right hand side of the gun. So you basically just put them in there and tap them in there like so, and then in there ready to go. You got different, change out to a different one, or put it back in after you clean it. That's all there is to it.
Now I'm curious, Bill. Are you a single stage or 2-stage guy?
I really like our standard M2 2-stage, which is by far the most popular one. Probably 70% of the ones we sell are M2 2-stage.
Now that gives you roughly what weight of sear release roughly?
Oh, combined, it's about 4.5 pounds combined. Part of it's in the take-up, and then you usually have around a crisp 2-pound let-off then after you take the take-up. And the two things I like about it is number one, I basically got that nice like 2-pound trigger after I take the pre-travel out of it, and I know where that's at because it's a good solid stop. And then with all that engagement, when the trigger's all the way forward here, you see how much movement there is there to it.
Yeah.
That's how much engagement you got before you even get it back to the stop to be able to actually fire the gun. So it's got actually as much engagement as a mil-spec trigger, so it's never going to follow or anything like that. Where you got the single stage units, you got less engagement because it's it's right there. You're just going to break quick as you pull the trigger. And so I'm a big fan of the standard M2. I know my buddy Paul Howe, he likes the heavier one, but I shoot these things a lot, so I feel pretty confident I'm not going to let off a round when I don't want to with the standard one without having to have that extra weight on the trigger pull.
Yeah.
Which one do you like the best?
Well, I'm a kind of an old single stage guy. I mean, I kind of learned initially. I've got both. I can use both, but if it's specific to, let's say, law enforcement, military use, something like that, I think there are some advantages to it. In that it's a little heavier release, and under stress, if you happen to be one of those people who screw up and end up with your finger on the trigger when you shouldn't, you kind of minimize. I think with one of the single stages, you end up with roughly like a 5.5 pound. Does that sound about right, Bill?
I mean, they can be adjusted to different weights, but I mean the way the standard single stage ships, I think it's only around 3 3/4 pounds. It's
okay. Well,
it's right around.
I kind of like the single stage. Now I can use both.
It's right around that. I can give you a pretty good idea. I play with these things enough. I can tell you about pulling the trigger, about how heavy this single stage is. But like I say, you can see here how easy it is to switch them out. It's like nothing to it, to install them or switch them out. I'd say that's about a 3.5, 3 3/4 pound trigger. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, I'd say you're spot on. That's an educated trigger finger you got.
Yeah.
No, you're right on that. Given that, I mean, again, I kind of grew up on the AR. That's kind of my generation kind of gun, and the single stage would be my pick. But if you hand me a gun with a 2-stage, I can certainly make it.
Yeah, and if you wanted a single stage that was heavier, we have 3 different weights of disconnector spring. You just put a heavy disconnector spring in it, and
that solves it.
And it'll add a pound or so to it.
Yeah.
By doing that.
And obviously, I know that like everything in the firearms industry now, supply and demand has been a real issue. How's this production as far as the delivery, and has this product been affected much, or are you guys plowing ahead pretty good with it?
Ken, we have never caught up on this product since we brought it out. And we just keep pouring resources at it, and we still haven't caught up. I mean, you saw at the plant today. I mean, we're running 6 Sodick EDM machines 24 hours a day, and we have, I think, what Brent say, 2 or 4 more coming.
Yeah.
And
that says it all.
And we still haven't, we're barely making enough of them for the guns we build, much less, for resale.
Yeah.
And our goal is obviously to, have plenty to build guns, fill over our back orders, and have some in stock is where we're trying to get to, But it's one of the negatives of the way we do it. I mean, when you're not spitting these things out, MIM process, by the millions, and you're actually having to machine it out of a piece of bar stock, we obviously can't make as many of them as fast.
Well, and the old adage is true. You kind of get what you pay for quite often when you buy any products, and it certainly applies to the firearms industry.
Yeah.
Well, great. Hey, I appreciate the insight. I hope you guys that are viewing this picked up a couple details that'll be helpful. I've got 2 or 3 of your triggers and guns over the years. I've never had any issues with them. I think they're superb. If you're one of those guys who really appreciates a good trigger pull and your ability to shoot well, it's going to be the TTU from Wilson Combat is something you really need to take a hard look at. Until next time, gang, Bill, Ken, see ya down the road on the next episode of Gun Guys.